What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to continue the conversation on mental diets, hopefully adding something positive to your mental diet for today. I really wanted to bring up the topic of acceptance, because I feel like it's really important, because having gone through like a whole bunch of drama when it comes to like the law of attraction and all of these kind of things where it's like constantly desiring, being in states of desiring, constantly wanting, constantly needing some external thing is I feel like a stumbling block, because it's like always saying in the present moment, which is the only time that's real, to creation, that you're separate from these things. And until you accept things the way they are, it's like you're constantly battling this illusion of separation and actually pushing what you do desire away from you. And what you do desire is just love, to feel good, to experience love, which is another way is to say, to experience God. And that's we're all kind of toying with these different things, but as somebody who's like kind of putting this into practice more and more so through the concept of stewardship, which biblically is about just taking care of what you already have. So it's like your money game, your relationships, your family, your responsibilities, your civic responsibility, your area, what you're doing, it's like, instead of constantly thinking like, oh, if I just hit this next milestone, then I'll feel like respectable and, people will like praise me and like I'll make it, I feel like I'm like a success story or something, and then I can be happy. And instead of chasing that carrot, it's more about, looking at creation as being perfect. And that can be a real hard pill to swallow, especially when, people, you see like predatory people and predatory institutions and, things going on with this authoritarian spirit that's becoming more and more manifest, which has always been there, by the way. It's like this is not something new. This has been going on. It's just now it's just becoming more and more obvious. And so even when you see like friends and family and people that are in your circle of people displaying a lot of this automaton kind of behavior, just parroting nonsense and upside down logic and shit like that, instead of like sitting there wrestling with it and trying to shake them awake, and forcing your will on them and all that kind of stuff, it gets to be more of a thing of just trusting that God will do that for them in God's timing, because God created them too and loves them just as much as you. We're all equal, like that. God's not a respecter of persons where it's like, oh, if somebody's on a pedestal over here and you're just, I sometimes get that with like Jesus, it's like, well, Jesus is up here and everybody else is just like, it's like Jesus was, God's child and you're just like the adopted, whatever. So, it's like, kind of gotta let that kind of like mentality, so we're all connected, we're all one, it's like, so it's like, yeah, it's maybe kind of stammering about how to explain that, but it's just like, trying to see everybody on the level playing field. Because God loves you just as much as God loves Jesus. It's like you got to start to understand that. It's like you don't have to keep working for some approval and validation. You need to realize that it's already there. It's already like that, and acceptance is a big part of that, and so much of like the old mindset, especially, as far as I'm concerned, is like from my experience of life, is like constantly working, struggling, striving, blah, 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 for, maybe some approval or validation or feeling worthy or any of these kinds of things, when you're already inherently worthy, because God created you. So because you're created by God, you're inherently worthy. And so it's like part of these things is undoing a lot of these misconceptions and mental errors in thinking, where you're like, maybe parents didn't express that, maybe they expressed a lot of conditional love. It's like, if you didn't do this, then you're bad, and it's like, I don't want to be bad. And so it's all of this kind of shit. But it's like stewarding has really helped me get out of this constant state of the present moment, just kind of wrestling with what is. And 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 because of that, not, losing peace, because it's like sitting there wrestling with what is and all these mental stories about what is, instead of just asking God, just like, what is your perspective on this? What do you think about this? Why am I just sitting here trying to stumble through this? It's like God's got a plan, so why don't you enlighten me on the plan for right now? Yes, like instead of me trying to figure out what can't be figured out, in kind of getting more and more into that kind of a mode, still drifting into the old state of consciousness, trying to force shit and struggle and strive, and through effort and the will of man to to get shit done, and looking at looking at things as a result. It's like, how much of your day do you want to be in your mind and fear about it? What is going on that you're telling yourself this story of maybe scarcity, not enoughness, not enough money, not enough time, not enough friends. It's like, not enough peace. There's not enough joy to go around. It's like everything's scarce and it's hard to come by, and all these stories, that come from this perception of a future tomorrow that's better. And even in like a lot of Christian mentality, it has to do with this, like, well, you struggle and you strive and sacrifice in the present moment so that you have this future payday of like heaven. But when you experience heaven, it'll still be now. You know what I mean? It's like, and there's a lot of biblical reference. God's with you in the present moment always. That's where God is. It's the here and now. It's like in the eternal moment. And it's within you. That connection is within you. You're connected. And so getting more and more in resonance with that connectivity is important, and it's a lot easier to do when you're not in states of fear and separation and declaring to creation constantly that, oh, I just need more, I need more, I need more to feel a certain way. It's like, once you feel a certain way, then reality will start to mirror that back to you, because it's constantly, in God's timing, showing you who you believe yourself to be in relationship to God. So it's like, if you feel separate and alone, it's not surprising then if you believe that to be real, then you see that in creation, and you see it more and more so as you believe it more and more. So the concept of stewarding has to do with it getting out of the mind and getting more into flow, getting more into like just what you're doing with your body, which it doesn't really, matter a whole lot. I used to think it was like, playing the guitar is one type of flow. And like, there's really not anything quite like that, where it's just like, you're just, because you're really kind of rhythmically, in this kind of like, I don't want to say like a hypnotic state, but like, it's really easy to just get out of the mind and just allow, which is another part of creation, is just allowing God's, grace, and letting God just do shit. It's like taking yourself out of the equation and just trusting that what's happening is because God's perfectly doing it. So much of this is about reaching this ideal state of mind, which I believe is, like the mind of Christ that the Bible talks about. It's like, it's not something to work for, but it's like you already have it. Once you let go of this constant mental chatter and everything else, and then just having this this constant like reassurance that God's in control of literally everything. On some level, I exist in God's consciousness. So, I can't be destroyed, because God can't be destroyed, and I'm inside of God's consciousness, and so it's like, not only that, but then it's like looking, instead of having all of these separate wills, which like the old mind used to think of, like, oh, there's the will of nature, there's like, your body has some separate will, there's like the will of like the economic will, there's like the will of nature, and it's like all of these separate things, when in truth there's only God's will constantly being manifested, and like just getting more into a state of mind where you just trust and allow these bridges of incidents to play out as your ideal state of mind is being more and more so realized, through not desiring even, but it gets a real fine edge, because it's like, desiring a state of mind is still a desire, so there's a subtle difference, between desiring the mental activity of, like, things aren't good enough now, versus the desire to experience more and more things of love which is another way to say more and more things of God, peace, joy, all the fruits of the Spirit, to experience more and more of those types of states of consciousness, and I feel like a big part of that is accepting the present moment, because in doing that, you're also accepting yourself, because you're being shown yourself through the circumstances and events of your life. It's like, if you have scarcity beliefs, it's not shocking then if you have scarcity manifestations. If you have, the more aligned, biblically aligned beliefs, that ultimately all things are possible for you, that you can be, do, or have anything through your belief in God. Because God's does it for you. And it's like, holding that kind of a state of mind where it's like you're not filled with this fear, this constant fear of not enoughness, or things are just always working for your detriment. It's just one thing after another. Oh, I just got such terrible luck. It's like, be really mindful of these things you tell yourself, because then it's like, yeah, if I hear you say, oh, I got really bad luck, my thought about it is like, well, yeah, probably, because you keep telling yourself that. You could just as easily tell yourself you have great luck. It's just a nonsense story that you just believe for some reason. Oh, probably because, well, you should hear this bridge of incidents that confirms my bad luck. It's like, okay, we're all doing this constantly. You can either unconsciously continue to give yourself bad luck and just these fucked up weird situations, or you could just tell yourself you have good luck because God's on your side and everything you do is blessed, and God's not going to, everything's working for your good. It's like, get into like the promises of God, and really start focusing on believing these things, and where in the past you'd tell yourself these illusions of scarcity and fear and separation, start telling yourself some of the promises of God that contradict those things, and believe it, and put it to the put it into practice, and you do that constantly in the present moment. It's a battle to stay at rest, and acceptance is a part of that, and it's like kind of triggering for the ego mind to hear that, because it's like it takes acceptance as like almost like a defeat. It's like, well, that sounds like giving up, or like like even like the word surrender. It's like that feels like you're like a bitch. Then it's like, oh, what do you mean surrender? It's, I'm a fighter. It's whatever you're telling. It's like, start to unpack these in maybe a vocabulary that's not so triggering, which the teacher, the helper, is within you. So you can define that thing with the Holy Spirit, which is inside of you. And so, don't get so caught up on language and the verbiage and the definitions of words, because if culture hasn't taught you anything by now, it's that the definitions of words are just, oh, let's change, what's a vaccine mean? Oh, today it means this, or today it means that. It's like whatever we want it to mean. It's part of like the illusionary type thing of our speech, but not to take speech lightly either, because that's a really big deal, especially the things you speak to yourself and to others. A lot of times mirrors thought anyway. But when it comes to like kind of accepting the present moment, it's more about, from my perspective, instead of like accept it, like accept that you're doomed, or it's like, that's not real either. It's like God's in control of everything. God's creation is the way it is, and it's reflecting you. And so it's like, the more you accept these things, not to say that you have to continuously then, if you have a garden and it's like, oh, it's filled with weeds, I just have to accept that. It's one thing to see the garden and not be triggered and then scared and then shut down, and then not be able to handle it. It's another to like look at the garden and go, okay, well, it is what it is. So how can I take care of this garden better? How can I do a better job of doing this? And like, as someone who's like done a garden now, I don't know, like, feels like I've just done that at every house I've lived in. Had a garden. I think I was in my early 20s when I bought that trailer and the land and everything. I started doing that. It's a growing process. It's like, it takes time to figure out how to plant things and not have the whole thing just turn to weeds. It takes time and experience, and it's like every time you do it, you learn something new. But we're always just going through these repetitive loops, learning more and more so each time. So don't shame yourself or guilt yourself. If you like look at your life and it's like, you want me to accept this? it's like okay, just realize it's the past version of you. This is what you think. This is really what you think. It's a mirror. You don't change the mirror. If you go in there and it's like, oh, I got shit on my shirt or something. I see it in the mirror. You don't want to break the mirror. I mean, it's like you just take the shirt. It's like, oh, well, I got a stain on there. I'll try to whatever. And then you kind of steward it. You take care of it. You try to get what you can handle and get better and better at it, because as you start to do that, you'll naturally start to elevate into more and more things. And because it's easy to like look at somebody else and be like, oh, look at all the plates they spin, and they seem so happy, and they seem to get all their shit together, and oh, look at how people talk about them, and they just seem like a hot shit and whatever. Who knows what's going on in their mind? They could be miserable, or they could be like really at peace. It's just like they've just been because that's an expression of their inner conversations. Their life is, and it's an expression of their faith, and an expression of their relationship with God. So it's okay to like see people at maybe more different levels, and be like, that's something to I don't know, get inspired by or whatever. But it's like, well, if they can do it, you can do it too, because what's manifesting that is God's will in their life. It's just like part of like this being acceptant of the present moment, is realizing that you don't have to do it. It's God that does it. So it's like your abundance or your health, your whatever's, your prosperity is all connected with your worthiness level, what you feel worthy of. It has nothing, God takes pleasure in prospering you according to the Bible. So it's like, why would, so let God take pleasure in that in your life. It's like, be thankful that God's like that. It's just like, okay, cool. And then realize that the physical manifestation is part of God's rewarding you for your faith, because you're holding on to that now in the present moment. You hold on to that energy of like, you realize that God's going to do it for you, and it's your faith in that, and holding that in the present moment, which then starts the bridges of incidents that gets you to that manifestation. And it happens so natural and effortlessly. It's easy to miss it if you don't start connecting the dots, looking backwards. It's like one of the like is like talking to Digi, and his like story kind of just like sticks in my mind when it comes to like, you can almost miss it, because he was talking about like going on a date or something with this chick, and it's like I can't remember exactly how the scenario played out, but he's like, he just really wanted to hug or something, and like he goes on this date, and the date was just like a disaster or whatever. And like he goes through all the motions of it. They went to a place he didn't like it. It wasn't resonating with him at all. And then at the end of it, he got a hug, and through all those bridges of incidents, it's like he didn't even didn't realize it until we were talking. And it's like, well, at least you got your hug. And then he's like, oh shit, I did get a hug. It's like, and so it's like he would have almost maybe missed that, and I could have missed many of these types of things too. It's just that really stands out for some reason to me, and it's just like start connecting the dots, looking backwards. It's like, and seeing how these things constantly are so effortlessly and normal, because there's always been doing this, and so in that acceptance of kind of these bridges of incidents, knowing that it's leading you. We don't know the ways and the means and all this shit. That's mysterious, and that's like, God knows that, and it's like, what we got to do is in the present moment just accept that we don't have to worry about it. That's not our problem. God's in control. He's moving these things around. He's moving people to hear these messages that need to hear them, and then it just ripples through creation, and it is like even a retro causality thing where the past is like can realign, and that might seem like really far-fetched, if you're like really into the story of materialism from the world still. But once you have that paradigm rocked and you see how many holes are in it for one, how much of it is just nonsense when you relearn it as an adult. And it's like, really? That's fucking, how did I fall for that? But like, in that process, you do a whole lot of your own kind of life experience to kind of understand these different things. But I just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention, kind of share that point of view, and hopefully add something to your mental diet for today that was like something to think about, something to practice. It's only ever now, so I mean, you can practice it, you can not practice it, and it's always now when you are, and so other than that, I think I'm gonna bounce. Thanks everybody for listening and liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things, and thank you for your spiritual support and your financial support. I appreciate it, and till the next now, God bless.